Viola Davis read the name on the card, and the sentence she had been speaking stopped existing. Not paused. Stopped, the way a river stops when the ground beneath it simply ends. Complete cessation, no diminishment, no warning. Her eyes did not move from the card. Her lips, which had been moving with the easy rhythm of a woman who has spent a lifetime knowing exactly what to do with language, went still. Her hand, holding the card, did not tremble. It simply stopped moving, suspended in the air between her and Jimmy Fallon's desk, as if time itself had made a small local decision to cease. Jimmy Fallon watched her face and felt the words leave him the way air leaves a room when a window blows open, suddenly, completely, without his consent. His mouth was open. There was nothing behind it. He looked at Viola Davis, and he looked at the card in her hand, and he looked at Viola Davis again, and he felt tears arrive on his face the way tears arrive when you do not understand yet why they are coming, which is the truest way they ever come. He sat with his hands flat on the desk. He did not speak. He did not move. He understood with the particular instinct of a man who has done this work for 11 years that this moment did not belong to him, and that the only appropriate thing he could offer it was to get out of its way. The Roots did not play. The cameras kept rolling. A woman in the front row lowered the program she had been holding and set it in her lap and looked at the stage the way you look at something when you have forgotten that you are in a public place. 300 people went still in the specific way of people who do not want to disturb what is happening by being too loudly present for it. For 31 seconds, Viola Davis sat in that chair and did not speak and did not move and held the card in the air and looked at a name. Then she set the card down on the desk very carefully. She pressed her fingertips against it, not gripping, just touching, the way you touch something to confirm that it is real. She looked at Jimmy. Her eyes were full. She said, "Where did you find this?" It was a Tuesday night taping. April 2024. The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. Viola Davis was the guest, 58 years old, carrying herself with the particular authority of a woman who has arrived somewhere through effort that most people cannot fully imagine, and who has not forgotten a single step of the journey. She was the only black woman in history to have achieved the Triple Crown of acting, the Emmy, the Tony, the Oscar, and she moved through the world with the specific gravity of someone who has converted a great deal of pain into something permanent and useful. The audience had given her a standing ovation before she was fully seated. The interview had been everything: direct, funny, vulnerable in the way of someone who has decided that honesty is more interesting than armor. Jimmy was in full flight. The room was warm and present and alive. He had told her he wanted to play a game. A simple thing, names on cards, faces, matching, just for fun. A hometown segment, he said, smiling. People who shaped you. He had slid a small stack of cards across the desk, face down. He asked her to turn them over one at a time and say whatever came to mind. The first 3 had produced exactly what the segment was designed to produce: warmth, a story, a laugh, the audience leaning in. It was going perfectly. She turned over the 4th card. Not loud, not dramatic, just a name. Printed on an index card in plain black letters, the way any name looks when it is printed plainly. 8 letters. A first name and a last name. The kind of name that means nothing at all to the 300 people in that studio and, for reasons that none of them yet understood, meant everything in the world to the woman holding it. Jimmy Fallon watched Viola Davis read the name, and he watched the sentence she had been speaking stop existing. The entire studio froze. The entire studio froze. The director in the control room did not cut. The band did not find a transition. A camera operator moved his camera slightly toward her face, and then stopped moving it, because her face was already doing everything, and the job was only not to miss it. The audience sat in the particular silence of people who are watching something they do not understand and are trusting that the understanding will come if they are patient enough to stay. Had she read it wrong? Was the name someone who had hurt her? Someone from a difficult chapter? Someone whose appearance in this bright room was an intrusion? Was she all right? 300 strangers held the silence around Viola Davis like a thing worth protecting, and waited. Then she pressed her fingertips against the card and said, "Where did you find this? To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1982. Viola Davis wasn't always Viola Davis. Not the Oscars and the Tonys and the 30 years of work that changed what American audiences understood a performance could be. Before all of that, there was a girl from Central Falls, Rhode Island, one of 6 children. A house with no heat in winter, hunger that was not metaphorical, poverty of the specific and grinding variety that does not leave a person even after they have left it, that lives in the body as a permanent memory of what scarcity feels like. She has spoken about this. She has always spoken about it with the directness of someone who decided early that the truth of where she came from was not something to be managed or softened, because softening it would dishonor every person who was still living inside it. In the fall of 1982, she was 17 years old and a junior at Central Falls High School. And she was performing. She had been performing since she could remember. School plays, community theater, anything that would have her. Because the stage was the one place where the facts of her life outside the stage did not follow her in. On the stage she was not cold and not hungry and not afraid of what the next month would bring. On the stage she was only the work, and the work was the one thing that had always felt like it belonged to her completely. But no one had told her yet that she was extraordinary. They had told her she was good. Teachers had noted it, written it in reports, said encouraging things that were true as far as they went, and did not go nearly far enough. She did not yet know the difference between being good and being extraordinary, because no one who had seen both in person had yet looked at her and told her plainly which one she was. Doris Eaton came to see the fall production at Central Falls High School in November 1982 because her grandson was in it, playing a tree in the background of the second scene, and she had driven up from Providence to watch him be a tree and to take him for ice cream afterward, because that is what grandmothers do. She was 71 years old. She had spent 34 years as a dance teacher in Providence, running her own small studio out of a converted storefront, teaching girls and boys from the neighborhood the discipline and the joy and the particular honesty of movement. How the body does not lie the way the voice can lie. How when something is real in the body, it is visible to anyone watching who knows how to look. She was retired now. Her knees had made the decision for her 4 years earlier, 2 surgeries and a long conversation with her doctor, and the quiet acknowledgement that the body that had given everything to the work had finally asked for something in return. She missed it every day. She sat in the 3rd row of the Central Falls High School auditorium and watched the fall production and waited for the scene where her grandson would be a tree. And then Viola Davis walked onto the stage. Doris Eaton sat up in her chair. She did not do this consciously. Her body made the adjustment before her mind had processed why, the way a body responds to something that is more alive than what it expected. She watched Viola Davis perform for 22 minutes. She watched the way she inhabited the space, not filled it, inhabited it. Took possession of every inch of it, the way a person takes possession of a room when they have decided the room belongs to them. She watched the way her body committed to every choice before her mind had fully formed the choice. which is the mark of someone who has gone past technique into instinct. She watched the audience, which was mostly parents and grandparents and younger siblings, who had come to be supportive and were instead being riveted, which is the proof. When the production ended, she found the stage door. Viola was still in costume, taking off her stage makeup at a mirror in the corner of the girls' dressing room, when one of the teachers brought the older woman in and said, "This woman would like to speak with you, if you have a moment." Doris Eaton looked at the 17-year-old girl in the mirror, and she said, "I need you to hear something, and I need you to hear it clearly, because I don't have time to say it softly. I have spent 34 years in rooms where people were performing, and I know the difference between someone who will be good and someone who will be important. You are going to be important, not successful. Important. The difference is that success happens to you, and importance is what you do with it. You have the second kind. I need you to know that while you still have time to do something with the knowing." Viola Davis sat at the makeup mirror and looked at the woman in the reflection and felt something happen in her chest that she would not have words for until many years later. The specific sensation of a door opening inside a house you did not know you were locked in. She asked the woman her name, Doris Eaton. She asked what she did. Dance teacher, retired. She asked why she had come to the show. She said her grandson was the tree. She said it without irony, entirely matter of fact, and Viola Davis laughed for the first time that evening, and the laugh was the laugh of someone who has just been made to feel light by an unexpected thing. They talked for 30 minutes at the makeup mirror, while the rest of the cast changed around them, and the theater emptied out. Doris Eaton talked about what she had seen, specifically, precisely, naming the choices and explaining why they worked. The way a craftsperson talks about craft when they respect what they are looking at. She did not use the language of praise. She used the language of observation. She described what Viola had done the way you describe something true, because it had happened, because it was real, because the words were the only accurate response to it. When Doris stood to leave, she reached into her purse and found the back of an old receipt and a pen, and she wrote her name on it. She held it out. She said, "In case you ever need someone to tell you again." Viola Davis kept that receipt for 11 years, through high school and Juilliard and the early years of the career that was slowly becoming what it would be. She kept it until the receipt itself began to disintegrate, the paper thinning at the folds, the ink fading, and she had transferred the name, just the name, Doris Eaton, in her own handwriting, to the inside cover of a notebook she had kept since Juilliard, the notebook where she wrote things she needed to remember. She had tried to find her once. A few years after the industry had begun to know her name, when she had the means and the time and the urgency of wanting to close the loop on something that had stayed open too long, she had found that Doris Eaton had died in 1994, 12 years after the night in the dressing room, at 83. She had felt the loss of that with an acuteness that surprised her. The loss of the chance to say what she had wanted to say, which was simply, "You were right, and it mattered, and I never forgot." Doris Eaton's granddaughter had been trying to find the right way to reach Viola Davis for 6 years. Not through channels, not through publicists. She had tried those, and the letters had not arrived where they needed to arrive. She had finally written directly to The Tonight Show, because The Tonight Show had become, in her understanding, a place where these things were possible. She had included everything: the date, the school, her grandmother's name, a photograph of Doris Eaton taken in her studio in the 1970s, a woman in her 60s standing at a bar with her hand resting on it lightly, looking at the camera with the expression of someone who knows exactly what she knows. The letter had arrived on a Thursday. It had been opened by a junior producer who had read it twice, set it down and picked it back up, and then walked it to someone more senior without saying anything, because some things do not require introduction. Behind the scenes, Viola Davis had made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. She had asked for the name to be placed on an index card in the stack, fourth down, without context, without any preparation, without any signal. She had said, "I need to read it the way she came to me, without warning, from a direction I wasn't watching." She had asked whether Doris Eaton's granddaughter would come that evening. The granddaughter had come. She was seated in the 7th row, where she had been since the taping began, watching, with a photograph of her grandmother in her bag. When Viola Davis said, "Where did you find this?" Jimmy Fallon's voice came back to him in pieces. "Her granddaughter wrote to us," he said. "She's here tonight." 7th row. Viola Davis turned toward the 7th row. She was still pressing her fingertips against the card on the desk. She found the granddaughter's face, a woman in her 40s, sitting very still, hands folded. She stood up. She picked up the card. She walked to the edge of the stage and sat down on it, the way a person sits down when they need to be closer to the ground, and she looked at the granddaughter in the 7th row, and she held the card up so she could see it. "I wrote her name in a notebook," Viola said. Her voice was entirely steady, entirely controlled, the voice of a woman who has spent a lifetime knowing what to do with emotion, without letting it do things to her she has not chosen. "I wrote it in a notebook I've had since Juilliard. I have moved that notebook to every apartment, every house, every city I have ever lived in. 30 years. I wrote it because she told me I was going to be important, and I needed to be able to find the name when I needed to remember who first said it." The granddaughter in the 7th row was not trying to stop crying. She had stopped trying. But this is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming. Viola Davis reached into the pocket of her jacket and produced a small notebook, dark blue. The spine cracked from decades of opening, the cover soft with handling. She held it so the granddaughter could see it. Then she opened it to the inside cover and held it up, and from the 7th row, from the stage, from every camera in the room, visible to anyone who was looking, 2 words in handwriting that had not changed much in 30 years, Doris Eaton. "I want you to take this," Viola said. "I want you to take the whole notebook, and I want you to know what is in it. Every note from every role I ever prepared for, every piece of writing I did at Juilliard, everything I was trying to understand about this work during the years I was learning what it was. All of it starts from her. All of it is downstream from 30 minutes in a dressing room in Central Falls in 1982. I need you to have it because your grandmother needs to know, even now, even from wherever she is, that she was right, that I was important, that everything she said was true." The granddaughter stood up from the 7th row without deciding to stand. Her body made that choice. She walked to the foot of the stage. Viola Davis stepped down and put the notebook in her hands and held them both, the notebook between their palms like something warm. She said, "In case I ever needed someone to tell me again," Viola said. Her voice, for the first time, was not entirely steady. "I never stopped needing it. I just learned to hear it in what I'd written down." The granddaughter pressed the notebook against her chest. She could not speak. She nodded, once, slowly, with the weight of a woman who has just received something she drove from another city to receive and now understands she was not prepared for how it would feel. Jimmy Fallon was standing at the edge of the stage, both hands pressed together, his face entirely given over to the moment, tears moving freely and without apology. He did not speak. He did not try to manage the transition back to television. He stood at the edge of his own stage and witnessed it the way it deserved to be witnessed, without interruption, without commentary, with the full and humble attention of a man who understood that the best thing his show had ever done was simply provide the room. The Roots began to play. Something slow and warm and spacious. Something that breathed. Something that gave the room permission to begin coming back to itself, without rushing. 300 people who had been standing without knowing when they stood began to find their voices in the sound. The particular noise of a room that has been through something and is grateful. Doris Eaton's granddaughter brought the photograph to the taping that night. Her grandmother at the bar in the 1970s. Hand resting lightly, looking directly at the camera, and after the show she gave it to Viola Davis, who asked if she might keep it. It is framed now alongside the notebook, which Viola Davis did not keep because she had said she would not, and she is not a woman who says things she does not mean. In the photograph, Doris Eaton is in her early 60s, and she is looking at whoever is holding the camera with the expression of someone who knows what she knows and is not uncertain about it. The expression of a woman who has spent 34 years in rooms, learning the difference between good and important, and has stopped doubting her ability to see it. Jimmy Fallon has said, in the months since that Tuesday evening, that the 31 seconds when Viola Davis sat with a name on a card and did not speak were the 31 seconds that most precisely described what he believed the job was for. Not the performances, not the segments, not the games, but the chance, on any given night, for something true to walk into the room. Viola Davis has spoken about Doris Eaton publicly exactly once, in a brief interview 6 weeks after the taping, and she said only this: "There is a version of everything I have ever done that does not exist. And in that version, a woman went to see her grandson be a tree and came straight home afterward." I think about that version sometimes. I am very glad it is not the one that happened. Some people change the room they walk into simply by knowing what to look for. Some retired dance teachers drive to a high school auditorium on a November night to watch a child be a tree and end up watching something else entirely, and have the presence of mind to say so. And some names, written on the back of a receipt in a dressing room in 1982, travel forward through 30 years of notebooks and rolls and cities and early mornings and late nights, and arrive, finally, on an index card on a late-night desk, where they stop a sentence in the middle of itself and remind an entire room that the most important things that have ever happened to any of us were done for us quietly, without announcement, by people who had every reason to say nothing and chose instead to tell the truth.